I'm a 17-year-old girl and I live with my mom and my stepdad. I also have a stepbrother and a stepsister. We're not exactly what you'd call super close, but we all live under the same roof. My stepbrother, Ethan, is a bit older than me, and my stepsister, Sarah, is a couple of years younger. We all go to the same high school, but we don't hang out together much because we have different friends. My mom and my stepdad decided to get married after being together for about 5 years. They had a wedding 3 years ago, but we've all been living together as one big family for 6 years now. The wedding was sort of just making it official, you know? Now, about my dad. It's a bit sad. He died when I was really young, so I don't remember him that well. My mom and my dad were never married, and my dad's family didn't really approve of my mom. They thought she was too much of a party person back in the day. My dad and mom lived together for a bit, but they never got married because my dad's parents might have stopped helping him out financially if they had. My dad got really sick with leukemia when he was just 27, and he found out too late to treat it. Luckily, he managed to set up some money for my education before he passed away, so I wouldn't have to worry about that, and my mom wouldn't have to work too hard. After my dad died, it was just me and my mom for a while. Then, when I was about 8, my stepdad came along, and after dating my mom for some time, we all moved in together. We even moved to a new town because it was tough for my mom to stay in the place where she had so many memories with my dad. I've never met my dad's parents. They just didn't seem interested in getting to know me, which is a bummer. On the other hand, we do visit my mom's parents from time to time. They're pretty nice, but overall, my mom's side of the family isn't super close either. When I first moved in with my stepdad and his kids, I was really excited. I thought, this is it. I'm finally going to have that big happy family I've always wanted. I was just a kid and had a lot of hopes about what family life would be like. But things didn't quite turn out how I imagined. It's not like anyone was mean or anything. I don't blame them. It just wasn't what I expected. It was pretty disappointing for me, especially when I was younger. Everyone was polite and they welcomed me into their home, but the vibe was just off. We all lived under the same roof, but it didn't really feel like we were a family. I tried really hard to connect with my stepdad and his kids. I wanted us to get along and be close, but it seemed like they weren't too keen on making that effort. After a few months of trying without much enthusiasm from their side, I just stopped trying. It felt like we were more like roommates than a family. After I realized that we were pretty much just glorified roommates rather than a close-knit family, I stopped building castles in the air about us bonding like the families do in movies. It was a tough pill to swallow, especially as a kid who just wanted to feel part of something bigger, but the reality was different, and I learned to adjust my expectations early on. Now, about my mom's experience with my stepdad and his kids, she was in a completely different boat. They genuinely embraced her, not just as a stepmom or my dad's new wife, but as a real member of their family circle. This warmth and acceptance starkly contrasted with how they treated me, which was polite but distant, like I was just there, not really a part of their inner circle. This different treatment might have roots in their past experiences. My stepdad had a rough time with his ex-wife, who, from the stories I've heard, really put him through the ringer. She was portrayed as someone who was only in it for the money, and after their divorce, she left him with very little, taking off with a new partner and leaving her own kids behind. That betrayal must have left a deep impact on my stepdad and my step-siblings. Then my mom came into their lives. She's the total opposite of that negative image. They saw her as honest, caring, and supportive. For my stepdad, meeting someone so different from his ex must have felt like he struck gold, a chance at real happiness. My stepbrother and stepsister likely saw her as a stable adult presence they desperately needed after their mom left. In this new family dynamic, my mom was a symbol of new beginnings and hope. However, I wasn't part of the painful past they were trying to heal from, nor was I a direct part of the new happiness they found with my mom. This might explain why I felt like an afterthought. They weren't deliberately excluding me, perhaps, but their focus was so centered on healing and rebuilding with my mom that I just didn't fit into that particular puzzle. I didn't have blatant moments of exclusion or obvious reasons to feel left out. It was more about the subtleties, like being the last to know about family plans, or them having inside jokes that I wasn't part of. These small signals sent a clear message. I was on the fringe of their family unit, not really inside it. Living with this feeling wasn't easy, and although I tried to make peace with it, sometimes those feelings of being an outsider would really hit hard. Living with the feeling of being an outsider in your own home is a peculiar sort of loneliness. It's like you're just close enough to see the warmth from the fireplace, but never close enough to feel it. Despite being a part of the family by title, I felt like an observer, watching their bonds grow while I remained on the periphery. Sometimes I wondered if I was just overthinking things. To cope, I'd tell myself that maybe I was making a mountain out of a molehill. It was my way of soothing the sting on days when feeling left out became overwhelming. It's strange and a bit embarrassing to admit, but I started feeling jealous of my mom. She had seamlessly integrated into this new family dynamic, finding her tribe, her place. Meanwhile, I felt like I was peering in through a window from outside, never really part of the laughter and love that seemed so abundant for her. Over the years, this sense of exclusion built up into resentment. It was like everyone had moved forward and I had been forgotten, stuck in place. I kept these feelings to myself, worried that voicing them would make me seem petty or ungrateful. Why stir up drama over feelings that might just be in my head? So I never mentioned my feelings to anyone, choosing instead to keep the peace. I wasn't exactly happy with the situation, but I had learned to live with it. I settled into a sort of resignation, accepting that this was just how things were going to be. Now, let's fast forward to just a couple of days ago. I've been busy looking at colleges because I'm getting ready to graduate from high school in a few months. The whole process is pretty exciting, and thankfully, I don't have to worry about the financial part of it. My mom has always reassured me that there's an education fund set aside for me, thanks to arrangements made by my late dad. That fund is supposed to cover whatever college I choose to attend, so at least that's one less thing on my mind as I plan my next steps. When my mom sat me down a few days ago to talk about something important, I wasn't expecting what came next. She explained that my stepfather hadn't been able to save enough money for Ethan and Sarah to go to college. She was asking me to consider letting them use some of the money from the college fund that my dad had set up for me. Ethan had taken a gap year and was planning to start college at the same time as me, which was why this conversation was happening now. But there was a complication. Legally, my mom couldn't decide how the funds were used. My dad had made it clear in his will that I was the only one who could control where the money went once I turned 18. To be honest, I felt really conflicted. On one hand, I understood the tough spot my mom and stepdad were in, but on the other hand, I didn't feel right about sharing the fund. Ethan and Sarah, while they were my step-siblings, never really felt like family. The distance between us had always been palpable, and now, sharing something so personal and important as my dad's last provision for me felt uncomfortable. Moreover, I had plans for that money. Even if I didn't use all of it on college expenses, maybe due to earning a scholarship, I had thought about how it could help me later on, like securing an apartment or covering living expenses while I got settled into adulthood. I'd been economical all along, going to a public school to avoid extra expenses and saving wherever I could. I felt stuck. This was about more than just money. It was about honoring my dad's intentions and taking care of my own future. I knew this situation could cause tension no matter what I decided, but I also felt it was important to stand up for my own needs and respect the plans my dad had made specifically for me. The situation escalated quickly after I told my mom that I wouldn't be sharing my college fund with Ethan and Sarah. I explained that if Ethan wanted to go to college, he could explore options like student loans, which is a common route for many students. My mom didn't take well to my response. She called me selfish, and honestly, I didn't disagree with her. In this case, I felt that being selfish was justified. I was protecting resources meant for my future, resources that my dad had specifically set aside for me. I decided to be straightforward and told my mom that I was fine with being called selfish because I didn't view my step-siblings as true family. This honesty seemed to strike a nerve, leading my mom to react very strongly. She started yelling, shocked by my bluntness about not considering them family. It was a tough moment. I struggled to understand why she was so upset over my need to set boundaries around something as significant as my future. It highlighted a painful double standard. For years, I had felt like an outsider in what was supposed to be my family, yet it seemed unnoticed or unacknowledged by her. But now, when I asserted my feelings and decisions based on that long-standing dynamic, it was unacceptable to her. This discrepancy made me think about the uneven expectations in our family. While I was expected to automatically embrace my step-siblings as family and share significant personal assets with them, there hadn't been a concerted effort from everyone else to bridge the emotional distance with me. It felt unfair that the same rules didn't seem to apply in reverse. The confrontation left me reflecting on family dynamics and the complexities of blended families. It was clear that, moving forward, navigating these relationships would require clear communication and perhaps resetting some of the existing expectations. I tried to keep my cool and not yell, even though she was already pretty upset and calling me names like ungrateful. I just waited quietly for her to finish. After she was done yelling, I calmly told her, "You can keep yelling at me if you want, but I'm not changing my mind." I wanted her to understand that screaming at me wasn't going to make things better. In fact, it was just going to push me away even more and make me not want to help at all. After hearing this, my mom kind of calmed down a bit, and I thought, cool, now we can actually talk about this like grown-ups, and I can tell her how I really feel. But I was kind of kidding myself thinking that would happen. I forgot that in our house, it doesn't really matter how I feel. What really matters is making sure my mom, stepdad, and step-siblings are happy. My feelings? Not so much. So even though my mom settled down, she didn't really listen. Instead, she gave me an ultimatum. You have 1 week to change your mind, or else I'm going to have to kick you out of the house. So there I was, feeling like I'm in a tight spot because it seemed like no matter what I said, it wouldn't be good enough unless I just agreed with what they wanted. And now, I had this huge decision hanging over me with a deadline, and it felt pretty unfair. At first, I thought my mom was joking when she said she might kick me out, but she was totally serious. She even reminded me that my 18th birthday was coming up soon, and once I wasn't a minor anymore, she wouldn't legally have to let me stay at home. That meant if I didn't agree to share the college money my dad left just for me with my step-siblings, I'd be on my own. It was super shocking to hear my own mom say something like that. I mean, she's my mom, and I'm her kid. Shouldn't I come first? But here she was, putting me in this really tough spot for my step-siblings. She told me to think hard about my decision because it could cost me everything. Then she just walked out, leaving me alone to think about everything she'd said. It felt really bad, like a slap in the face. I couldn't believe she would treat me like this. And right then, I decided I wasn't going to stick around in a place where I felt so undervalued. So, I reached out to my friends. I told them I needed to find my own place because I planned to move out right on my 18th birthday. I was ready to start figuring things out on my own, no matter what it took. It was a big step, but I felt it was necessary to stand up for myself and start a new chapter where I could feel more respected and in control of my life. I spilled everything to my friends, detailing exactly what my mom had said and stressing how urgent the situation had become. With my 18th birthday looming, I knew that once I turned 18, I'd have full access to the money my dad left for me. That meant I could finally make my own decisions about where and how to spend it. Sure, managing a budget and picking the right degree in college would be tough, but it seemed a small price to pay for independence. I was ready to move out and live on my own terms, rather than continue to feel like I was just being tolerated by my family. The realization hit hard. After that harsh conversation with my mom, it was crystal clear that I wasn't really welcome at home. It hurt to admit, but it felt like I'd always been just an afterthought to them. Looking back, I realized that I might have even been underestimating how detached from me they truly felt. I never saw it getting to the point where my own mother would threaten to kick me out. As I was processing all this, a couple of days later, one of my friends came through with some hopeful news. She had talked to her cousin who was applying to the same colleges I was interested in because we shared similar career goals. This connection felt like a small beam of light at a really dark time, offering a glimpse of a new beginning and maybe even a new ally in my next chapter. When my friend suggested I get in touch with her cousin, who was already planning on living independently near college, it sounded like a perfect plan. We could team up, rent an apartment together, and support each other as we navigated college life. I reached out to her immediately, and we clicked right away. She was understanding and kind when I explained my family situation, which made me feel really comfortable about the idea of living together. However, I still had to figure out where I'd stay in the months before college started. Thankfully, that part resolved itself pretty quickly. My friends stepped up, offering me a place to stay with them until I could move into the apartment for college. It wasn't the simplest solution, and it definitely had its risks. Moving around, living out of a suitcase for a bit, and relying on the kindness of friends. But it was infinitely better than staying in a home where I felt unwelcome and unvalued. Moving forward with this plan, even though it was a bit messy, felt like the right thing to do. It was about taking control of my own life and making decisions that would lead to a happier, healthier future. This step toward independence was scary, but it was also empowering, knowing that soon I'd be in a new place where I could start fresh and be my own person. Dealing with the atmosphere at home after the fight with my mom was incredibly tough. It wasn't that they were outwardly mean or hurtful in an obvious way, but what they did was almost worse. They made me feel completely alienated, as if I was the most unwanted person there. Whenever I walked into a room, it was like I flipped a switch that made everyone else leave. They'd stop talking and scatter, or just shoot me this look that made me feel about 2 inches tall. No one would speak to me directly. It was like I suddenly became someone they couldn't even acknowledge. It was super humiliating. I felt so isolated and unwelcome, it was like being invisible in the worst way possible. It took some time to organize my next steps, but I was determined. As soon as my friends were ready to have me, I was set to leave. When my mom came to talk to me again, hoping I'd change my mind, I knew I had to stand firm and speak my truth. I told her straight up, I hadn't changed my mind. Moreover, I was actually planning to leave. I explained that the way she and the rest of the family had treated me was incredibly hurtful and just not okay. I described their behavior as almost psychotic, because really making someone feel so utterly excluded and despised just isn't normal or healthy. I was clear and firm because I needed her to understand that their actions had consequences, and for me, those consequences meant leaving to find a better, more positive environment. This wasn't just about the money or the college fund anymore. It was about my mental and emotional well-being. It was time to move on and build a life where I felt respected and valued. Leaving my mom's house felt like the only option left. I was clear with her that I had arranged to stay with friends until I could start college, and I told her bluntly that I never wanted to see her again. It was a harsh thing to say, but I felt pushed to my limits. My declaration seemed to trigger her anger once more, as she lashed out, calling me selfish and ungrateful, and told me to leave. Walking out that door was a relief, though it wasn't easy. As much as I was glad to be away from the negative environment, a part of me was also filled with a mix of hurt and anger. During the times I was isolated in my room, I couldn't help but dwell on everything that had happened since my mom remarried. Life had changed drastically, and it felt like she was completely oblivious to my discomfort and unhappiness because she was content with her new family. For a long time, I tried to suppress my feelings to keep the peace, and even attempted to be happy for her. However, the recent events made it painfully clear that I wasn't a priority to her. Feeling sidelined and undervalued like that, I found myself wrestling with thoughts of retaliation. I felt dismissed and unimportant, and part of me wanted to find a way to make her realize just how deeply her actions had affected me. Yet, as I moved in with my friends and began to settle into a new chapter away from that turmoil, I also started to reflect on what getting back would really mean. Was it worth clinging to these negative feelings and planning revenge? Or was it healthier to focus on building my own life, putting my energy into positive steps forward rather than looking back in anger? I realized that true independence and happiness would come from letting go and moving on, not from holding on to grudges. My goal became to thrive in my new environment, to make the most of my college years, and to create a life that was fulfilling on my own terms. This would be my way of rising above the past, not with revenge, but by living well and finding peace within myself. So after I finally moved out of the house, I decided it was time to tell everyone the truth about what was going on with my mom. I had waited until I was out of the house for a week before I said anything because I didn't want her to be able to tell me off or make me feel bad. I mean, no one would think what she was doing was okay if they really knew about it. Once I was safely staying with a friend, I felt ready to share everything online. I wrote a post explaining exactly what happened. My mom had been yelling at me just because I didn't want to give my college money to my step-siblings. I pointed out that none of my step-siblings or my stepdad had ever really treated me like part of their family, but my mom didn't seem to care about that. It only became a problem when I started treating them the same way they treated me. I talked about how unfair it was that there were different rules for me than for them. I also wrote about how, once my mom got married again and started her new family, it felt like she just forgot about me. I ended the post by saying that I thought my mom was being super selfish for treating me badly just because I said no to something that was totally unreasonable. By sharing my story, I wanted everyone to understand my side and see the double standards I was dealing with at home. It was a big decision to go public with this, but I felt it was important for my own peace of mind. Any reasonable person would have made the same decision I did, considering the situation. The money we're talking about here was specifically left to me by my dad, meant for my future, not for anyone else. It didn't seem right for my mom to ask me to share it with my step-siblings, especially since they never really made me feel welcomed or treated me like part of their family. If things had been different, if they had been kind to me at any point, maybe I could have considered sharing. But that wasn't our reality. I was so upset and frustrated by everything that was happening, and I ended up pouring all that frustration into a single online post. This post reached a lot of people, including friends of my dad and their families. At that moment, I didn't care about the consequences. I felt hurt and wanted to express my feelings. I wanted some kind of justice, or at least to be heard. Before all this, my mom had been the center of my world. She was my main source of support and happiness. I didn't have a relationship with my grandparents, and my dad was gone. My mom was my rock, my best friend. So when it seemed like she chose my step-siblings over me, it felt like the ultimate betrayal. It was a really tough spot to be in. I felt like I was losing not just my family, but a part of my identity. Sharing my feelings online was my way of coping, of trying to find some control in a situation where I felt powerless. Releasing all my pent-up feelings in that post was a way to get everything off my chest. I was so hurt and didn't really think about what might happen next. And just like I thought, the post blew up. My mom saw it, and so did many others. It was shared widely. Soon my inbox was flooded with messages from her. She told me that my post had really hurt her, and that it was ruining her life because it got so much attention, especially among her friends who were quick to spread the word. She tried to reach out to me multiple times through calls and texts, but I was too upset to respond. I was still processing my own pain and didn't feel ready to talk to her. Despite hoping that venting online would ease some of my frustration, the aftermath didn't bring the relief I was looking for. Instead, the messages from my mom made me feel even more conflicted about my decision to go public. In her texts, she expressed deep disappointment. She said she never expected me to do something like that, and reminded me that she had always tried to raise me to be kind and compassionate. Reading her words, I could tell she was genuinely upset, and perhaps didn't fully understand the depth of how excluded and hurt I had felt by her actions. This whole situation was more complicated than I initially thought. My intention wasn't really to hurt her, but to express my feelings and find some support. Now, seeing her reaction, I realized just how much my words had impacted her. It made me question if I should have handled things differently, maybe by addressing these issues directly with her before making them public. The backlash was a stark reminder of the power of words and how quickly things can spiral out when shared in the heat of the moment. But I was the opposite of both those things, and she couldn't even believe that I was her daughter anymore. And then she pulled out the big guns and told me that had my father been alive today to witness this vindictive and malicious side of me, he would be terribly disappointed and wouldn't even want to be related to me. That really got me, and I felt like I was doing something horrible. I started rethinking everything, and that's what brought me here eventually. At this point, I don't even know if it was right of me to not want to share my funds with my step-siblings. I don't know if I should make things right with my mother and the others because I don't even know if I can face them anymore after what I did. But also, this might be a very clever way of trying to manipulate me. And if it is definitely working, that's why I need you guys to help me. Because now that everybody has the facts, I can finally come to a conclusion. So, am I the a-hole refusing to share my college fund with my step-siblings and then making a post against my mother? Update 1. Hey there. First off, thanks a ton for all the supportive messages everyone sent. They really helped me feel better and see things more clearly. I was almost ready to give my mom another chance because I wanted to believe there was some good in her. But then I got thinking, what kind of mom does and says the stuff she did? It's tough to admit, but it seems like she's just not the great person I hoped she was. So, I decided to block her to stop any more messages from coming in. I figured if she tried to reach out again, it'd probably just be to twist things around or to pressure me into taking down my post. And about that post, I'm not ready to take it down. Not until I get a real apology from her. She knows where I am because my friend's mom kind of let it slip, so if she really wants to fix things, she knows how to find me. But if she doesn't even try, I guess that just shows she cares more about what other people think of her than making things right with me. Update 2. So it's been 2 weeks since I've been living with my friend and have moved out from my stepfather's house. After that post, I had absolutely zero contact with everyone from my family. I did go to school a couple of days and I ran into Emily a few times, but she just shot me a really nasty look and pretended like I wasn't even there. Not surprising, considering the fact that they are pretty much expert in pretending that I don't exist. They have been doing it for the past 8 years. They must have found it easier now. Anyway, my mother finally came to visit me last evening. She arrived here with a black plastic bag that people generally use for trash and dumped it in the living room, saying that it had all my leftover stuff in it. Basically, everything that I had been able to pack into my duffel bag when I was leaving my house. It felt a little insulting that she had used a trash bag to pack my stuff, and it was way more insulting when she dumped it all on the floor of the living room, leaving me to gather at my friend and her parents who saw this all unfold was scandalized. They did not appreciate my mother's behavior one bit and actually took it upon themselves to argue with her about it. They told her that considering the fact that I was her only daughter, she should have more compassion for me instead of treating me so cruelly. They really scolded her, but she didn't take it kindly. She told them that they had no right to speak about her parents' techniques when they were the ones harboring a delinquent like me. I almost burst out laughing when she said that, because I was far from a delinquent. I was literally a scholar student and she had known that. I almost mentioned it myself, but I didn't have to. Thanks to my friend who stood up for me, she told. My mother often said that she was grateful that her parents were nothing like my mother and had a heart. It turned into a bit of a catfight, after which my mother got really huffy and left. I was really thankful for my friend and her parents. I don't think it was really necessary for them to stand up for me, but they did, and I couldn't be happier about it. This is probably the first time in my life that I had somebody to fight for me on my behalf, and it was just really touching. But anyway, I don't think my mother will be coming back anytime soon, because after the welcome that she received yesterday, I wouldn't dare show up around here again. And I really hope that she doesn't show up because I'm just sick of the drama now. I want to move on with my life and start a new chapter, but I can't do that if she keeps showing up again and again. So I pray and I hope that this is the last time that I've come across her. Update 3. Hey folks, so long time no see. I have been missing in action for quite a while now. Couple of months, I think. But you can't blame me for it. It was because I was applying to colleges and trying to get into a good one with the scholarship. I had been grinding really hard and it all paid off. I'm in my first choice of school now, and yes, I'm sticking to the plan that I'd come up with a couple of months ago. My friend's cousin, who is applying to the same colleges, also got in here, and we are going to rent an apartment and live together. She's a really sweet girl, and the fact that she is my friend's cousin is just a cherry on the top, because this way, I get to keep in touch with everyone. The last couple of months have been very difficult for me emotionally, but my friends helped me get through it all. And I can't tell you guys how thankful I am to have such people in my life. I know a lot of people who have terrible parents and families rely on their friends for emotional support, but I've tried to avoid that so far. However, now that I know how far my friends are willing to go for me, I feel like they are my family. I'm always going to be grateful for everything that people have done for me. Seriously, I don't think I could have made it this far without everybody's help. And that includes the people here who reached out to me through messages and said such supportive things to help me through. This is just really strange and funny how my own mother hasn't even bothered to text me even once after I moved out. She didn't even care that I had unblocked her and she could actually talk to me. That's how little I mean to her. But you guys are. My friends told me to have faith in myself because I could do it. It's really cute how little strangers on the internet did more for me than my mother did. But anyway, that's all in the past now. I'm looking forward to having a fresh start here, and I'm really excited for what the future holds.